Hey, I'm Dr. Jerry Williams, Urgent Care 24/7, here to talk to you today about a super common problem, sprained ankles. How do you deal with them? Well, I want to give you some advice because sprained ankles are incredibly common complaint, but is it a sprain? And that's the question that you got to answer out of the gate. Back when I was a kid, you sprained your ankle, usually in sports. Ice, elevation, ACE wrap, and compression wrap, and see how you feel. Well, that's okay. You can do that. We call that RICE, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. But the reality is, if you've got a sprain, especially a severe sprain, it's really a good idea to get seen and examined by a professional and probably get an x-ray. You go, well, wait a minute, that's kind of overkill. No, not really. Because if there's a fracture, it's important that that fracture get diagnosed early so it can be treated properly early. Once you get that x-ray, you know, no fracture present, okay, great. We're going to treat this like a sprain, severe sprain, mild, medium severity, but we're going to treat it as a sprain because we know there's no fracture. But you can't tell that just on examination. You have to get that x-ray. So if you sprain your ankle or your child sprains your ankle, it's really important to go. I know you don't want to go in. I know you don't want to have to spend the money and get the x-ray, but it's critically important. Go get that x-ray done and get it done as cost effectively and quickly as possible. Get a result, find out no fracture, great. We're going to use RICE treatment, rest, ice, compression, elevation, and anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen or naproxen sodium. But if there's a fracture there, critically important that gets managed appropriately very early, because mismanaging or continuing to walk on a fractured ankle or foot can cause long-term problems. Hey, Dr. Jerry Williams here from Urgent Care 24/7. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it to be useful. If you could do me a favor, if you like the video, be sure to click on the like button. Also hit subscribe, and when you hit subscribe, click on the notifications and click the bell there. That way you'll be sure to be notified every time Urgent Care 24/7 and Affiliates releases a new video. And remember, life is 24/7, and so are we.